Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi is missing in an apparent helicopter crash. State media say the aircraft carrying Raisi and the foreign minister had to make a hard landing near the border with Azerbaijan. They were on their way back from launching a hydroelectric project.
Rescue workers from the Red Crescent search for Iran's president. The aircraft is reported to have made a rough landing, and weather conditions are complicating the operation. Iran's supreme leader urged calm.
We hope that God the Almighty returns the dear president and his colleagues in full health to the arms of the nation.
The helicopter was lost in the East Azerbaijan province of Iran, near the town of Vazakan. Iranian Red Crescent said the location was dangerous and difficult to cross. Raisi and the leader of Azerbaijan had just inaugurated a hydroelectric scheme on their shared border. Some Iranians are worried.
We are deeply saddened by this incident.
Honestly, the dominant feeling is fear. It's a strange feeling.
Others are celebrating the news. This social media purports to show fireworks over the capital Tehran, and a woman saying she hopes reports of Raisi's demise are true. Ebrahim Raisi is considered a hardliner. He became president in 2021, bringing all branches of power under the control of hardliners loyal to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khomeini. Raisi backs Khomeini's strategy of supporting terror groups acting on Iran's behalf across the Middle East. With Raisi's fate still uncertain, state TV has been showing people gathering in mosques, and news outlets have been urging Iranians to pray for their president.
Let's get more with Arash Azizi. He is an author and a contributing writer for The Atlantic with a focus on Iran. He joins me now from New York. Welcome to the program, Arash. I want to start by asking you, what do you think is going through the minds of Iranian leadership right now?
I think they are basically thinking, I think they probably know that Raisi is very likely dead, and at any rate, they're trying to plan as to how to organize the procedures that will come according to the Iranian constitution. The vice president Mohammad Mokhber will hold the power for a little while, and within 50 days new elections have to be organized. So I think they're thinking about that. They're also thinking about the potential for political instability, perhaps popular protests, although I don't think they're very likely at the moment. But they're also thinking about the implications of this for internal power struggles, which are very heightened. Ghalibaf, for example, the Speaker of the Parliament, is someone who has been attacked a lot by the people who are close to Raisi. Iran elected the new parliament earlier this year. It also elected a new Assembly of Experts. This is a body that is tasked with picking a supreme leader. Both of these bodies have to now meet, pick a new leadership, and Raisi's sudden death is for sure going to have an effect on all of this. So that's what they're concerned about.
So Mr. Mokhber is supposed to take over, but you also mentioned concerns about seeming challenges of power struggles. So does that mean the transition to the next leader will not be smooth?
Well, I think for the presidency, it will probably be likely smooth. I mean, the Iranian constitution has a very clear procedure. Mokhber will assume the functions of the presidency, and he, together with two others, will form a council, and they will have to organize new elections. The question will be, the really million-dollar question, if you will, is who is going to run in these elections? Iranian presidential elections have never been free and fair, but they have sometimes been competitive. Namely, they were competitive from 1997 to 2017. That means different factions of the regime were allowed to run different candidates, and they genuinely competed for the votes. Millions of Iranians voted for these elections. 2021 was the first time in a generation that effectively it wasn't competitive. Now, there were a few candidates, but majority of people didn't vote because Raisi's victory was effectively preordained. Raisi was effectively handed the presidency in 2021. The question now is it going to be handed to someone, or will it be a genuine competition? And if it is a genuine competition, which parts of the elite, which factions, which hardliner and conservative factions will be allowed to run, assuming that, of course, like reformist or pro-democracy factions will be, not allowed anywhere near power, of course, and nowhere near the presidency. But I believe it will be very interesting to watch because, as I said, there's already been a lot of infighting, and this is for sure it's going to be an intense next couple of months until we see who inherits the presidency, which will be important because Supreme Leader Khamenei is also 85. He holds most of the power. He will die in the next few years. And who holds the presidency when he is dead? And, the kind of material holding of power at the time, who holds what, will be important and in this sort of succession struggle that is sure to ensue upon his death.
I do want to also turn to the people, and because you've written a book on what Iranians want, focusing on the recent protests demanding their regime change. You mentioned protests are unlikely, but do you think Iranians will still see this as a possible opportunity for change?
I think Iranians are very sort of pragmatic, that vast majority of Iranians, I believe, do not want the Islamic Republic, and they will use creative ways to protest. I think right now the reality is Iranians have waged a few heroic really waves of a struggle. The last one, Women, Life, Freedom, which I try to describe in my book that you just mentioned. We have to remember this movement was in 2022 and 2023, so not that long ago. More than 500 people were killed on the streets by the regime. Thousands were arrested. A few were executed. Tumaj Salehi, an Iranian rapper who participated in this protest, supported them, is right now on the death row because of them. So that's sort of the background to this. But what I think is that there will be power struggles at the top. None of these regime factions does really a good job of representing Iranian people. So there will be power struggles at the top, but the Iranian people and their civic movements and their popular movements will not take a backseat for long, and they will for sure at a period make their mark again and continue their struggle for democracy and for a more representative government.
A fascinating series of developments to keep track of. Thank you so much for doing that for us, Arash Azizi.
Thank you.
Let's go now to Behnam Telblu, who is a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, where he focuses on Iranian security and political issues. He joins me now from Washington, D.C. Welcome to DW, Mr. Telblu. Map out the possibilities for us. What happens if this turns out to be a fatal crash?
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. There are some possibilities already laid out in the Iranian constitution, namely that the first vice president, Mr. Mokhber, could be taking over with the nod of the supreme leader. Of course, they would have about 50 days before a special election, or one would say selection, takes place. This matters quite a bit in Iran's already fractious domestic body politic, because there's a massive chasm between state and society. You've had Iranians boycotting elections en masse really since 2017, but particularly since 2019, concurrent with a rise in street protests in that country. The government has been keen to not give any kind of exogenous shocks to change things, because already there is, again, this massive chasm between state and society, and Iran was already slated to have presidential elections next year in spring of 2025.
Well, let me pick up on what you mentioned about a successor, Mr. Mokhber. We know that Raisi has a hardline and even brutal history. So if this successor was to step in, can we expect anything to change?
Indeed, I believe this is a story of stasis, not that has been essentially taken over by the hard Islamist right inside the Islamic Republic. These are folks who don't even desire to feign moderation. In 2021, when Raisi had his cabinet approved from the parliament, at least 40 to 48%, depending on how you count, had been sanctioned internationally, either from the EU, US, UK, or UN. In essence, you're going to have a continuation of that trend, meaning a hard right shift in Iran's domestic politics. But you mentioned the S word, and the S word for succession is that Raisi was long believed to be a potential successor to Iran's current octogenarian supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. And in this instance, that short list that he was on may have just gotten much shorter if indeed the media does confirm that Raisi died in this helicopter crash.
You mentioned that Khamenei is at the head of leadership here and the supreme leader is the one in charge. But in that case, could you walk us through what is the role of the president in Iranian politics?
It's a great question because sometimes the lines on paper don't translate to the political or social realities on the ground. And that's certainly the case with Iran's political system. For example, on paper, this person has, second or third level of political oversight of the military, but we certainly know that's not the case. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps definitely operates on its own, fundraises on its own, and is not beholden to the president or traditional lines of command authority that exist, again, on paper. More importantly, the president plays a ceremonial role, but stylistically can have an impact on domestic and foreign policy, and perhaps most importantly has an impact on implementing economic plans and is really a liaison between some of those plans that are green-lighted from the top, but brought into being by the parliament or more local council. So the president has a lot more to do with the way things are run at home than abroad. But again, despite this being a revolutionary regime, this is really much more a story of stasis, not change, because Iran's political system has been shrinking and moving to the hard right quite quickly.
I want to circle back to something you said earlier about the protests that are demanding regime change. Of course, they have been focused on Khamenei, but like you mentioned, Raisi does have a role to play in domestic politics and policies. Does this crash in any way make that demand for regime change possible?
Absolutely. One wonders if this will lead to another round of protests on the street. If I had to guess right now, I would say not likely. But there is one trend line to be aware of, which is since 2017, and particularly since 2019, the Iranian population has been using every single opportunity, be it a social crisis, environmental crisis, political crisis, foreign policy crisis, and even environmental crisis, to be able to signal to the world the massive chasm that exists between them and the state that overrules them, and to try to continue to resist and reject and put forward their own views and values. And that's why Raisi and Khamenei have both been the target of the Iranian population slogan since 2021. And that's why likely you're going to see the chasm continue despite whatever musical chairs may happen at the top in Tehran.
Behnam Ben Telblu, thank you so much for that clear analysis.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Niloofar Gholami from DW's Persian service joins me now. As the search and rescue operation continues, what more can you tell us about the accident?
Several hours have passed and there are so many contradictory news so far. One IRGC commander claimed they have received signal from the helicopter and the mobile phone of one of the crew at the accident site. He also said they are leaving with all the military forces to the region, and according to him, 30% of military forces are present in the region. And Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs claimed that at the beginning of the incident they were able to talk to Tabriz Friday Imam twice, and he said that I am not feeling well and I can hear the sound of ambulances. This is a claim state media repeatedly published. The commander-in-chief of the IRGC and a group of IRGC high-ranking commanders also went to the region. And according to the Red Crescent, the possible site of the helicopter crash has an area of 20 square kilometers, and yet no specific development has been announced by the investigative teams.
There are a lot of details, as you say, that we don't know yet. What has been the immediate reaction from the public in Iran to the news released by state media?
What a state media tries to show is that all Iranians are worried and praying for them to be safe and sound. But it seems many Iranians are expressing their happiness. I've read so many funny tweets about the incident. There are some videos of fireworks at different locations of Tehran and other cities as a reaction to the helicopter crash on social media. And that's why Iranian Ministry of Justice and the Police Intelligence Organization warned citizens about what they share on social media, claiming they are observing activists and influencers. The Tehran prosecutor office claimed they have warned a number of people who worried the public with publishing news about the helicopter crash.
Niloofar Gholami from DW's Persian service, thank you so much.